feature at the moment. So I've just put the record button on. So welcome tonight. What we're going to cover tonight is something very futuristic. Hi, Nadia. Yes, Nadia.
Hello.
Yes. Very futuristic, and that is the blockchain. It kind of follows on from last week. We had Andy McCowan join us last week, and he was talking about what they use blockchain, right, for log chain. Okay. Now, what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to briefly, I'm not going to go through every PowerPoint slide and make it like a lecture. Okay. We want to make this interactive, but also there'll be 12 Kahoot questions again that helps to summarize some of the major learning I want you to take away. Why are we doing this when maybe it doesn't affect your final project that's due next Tuesday? Maybe it doesn't affect your attendance. Well, maybe it does. We're going to grade your attendance anyway. We're counting every week. We count as much as we can, right? But maybe it doesn't affect if you didn't attend and participate tonight, but it will affect you. It'll affect you in the following way. What we're going to talk about tonight is about the future. When you go for a job interview, there's stuff that we will cover tonight that may be relevant to what you can talk about in a job interview, because it is about the future. It's not used everywhere. It should not be used everywhere. We're talking about blockchain. And some of you already have some ideas of a blockchain. Some of you might have even considered, should I buy Bitcoin? Right. The thought may have crossed your mind. As I was looking at it last night, it was $64,000 US, something. But I got my own view on that, and that's I'm not going to touch that type of stuff anyway. All right, but blockchain tonight is, so we're talking about it with respect to the supply chain, not with respect to fintech, and that's very important because it's totally related to, it may be part of, it may not be part of a future multinationals digitization strategy. It may be part of, it may not be part of a 3PL, 4PL, or service as a software as a service business model like Andy McCowan has. It may be relevant for those type of middle players. I call them middle players because they're in between buyers and they're in between suppliers. So that's why last year we talked about what I'm talking about tonight in week 2. And the feedback was that, Neil, it came to all of a sudden. And suddenly in week 3, we start talking about a supplier. So I thought, okay, I'll move it to the end and have a bit more of a transition, how we go from the first 2 weeks with the sourcing shift, the macro, then we go into the micro. And then all of you were able to move into the micro because around that time, you had to do an RFQ exercise. So this is what I'm presenting tonight was already presented last year. You can actually watch that lecture again in time. Having said that, I've created 3 nice videos of the content tonight for the full PowerPoint side by side by side. So, for example, in weeks to come, maybe you have a job interview. Maybe next year you have a job interview and think, oh, they might ask me about blockchain. Where's that video that Neil had? You can come back to my YouTube, watch the video and get up to speed on that. So just know that, every one of these weeks we recorded, but as you started to realize 5 weeks ago, I started making 15 to 20 minute short videos that summarize each week. And in 12 months time or 2 years time, when you need to re-energize your understanding because you're in this area, then you can go back to those videos and then it's valuable for you. All right. So I just ask you for now to relax at least for the next hour and a half. Your assessments They will take care of yourself. Yes, you will submit on time. Yes, you will all pass. Everything is going to be okay. Lisa, everything is going to be okay. All right. This is not the Squid Game where half win and half lose. Okay. All right. So, all right. So can you go to your Moodle and make sure that you have downloaded the PowerPoint slides? Have you all done that? Okay. Because I don't want to go through them slowly. I'll go them quick, but I'm actually a slide. Then I'll ask you a question. I'm going to ask you to enter information into the chat room as an answer to that question. Whoever enters first gets more brownie points than those that are late to enter in information. Okay. Not that the question's got to be hard. And then at the end, we're going to have a Kahoot as well. All right. And I think you'll realize that this content is very, very useful. And it actually fits in with what Andy was talking about last week. I'm just going to open this now. So the lesson plan for tonight, number one, is we're looking at the blockchain. Number two, I will integrate the whole learning of the whole unit in less than 10 minutes. Number three, we'll do Kahoot, but we may even do the Kahoot before that. Number four is your feedback and other questions that you may have, or plus final ideas for your video for your project. I would expect that you would have finished your project before the weekend, and then you focus on the video leading up to Tuesday. But let's talk about that later. All right, I'm just going to share my screen, if I may, please. Remember, participants can now see your screen. Oh, thank you, Zoom, for telling me that. Thank you. Okay. All right. So, Neil, here we go. I've got my notes. This is great. Okay, have you got the PowerPoint slide? Right, the first question for everyone. Oh, we're starting right away now. So in the chat room, I want you to write down which slides, there could be 2 or 3 of them, lists the key areas that are likely to shape your job opportunities in the future. Let me repeat. You've got the PowerPoint slides. What slide number you think lists the key areas that you think will shape your future job opportunities? So in the chat room, please. Let me pull up the chat room. Oliver's down, 3 and 4. Anyone else? Anisha, 3 and 4. Anyone else? Vicky said 21. This is good. 3, 4, 6. Vicky, you said 21. Why did you say 21?
Because I saw on 21, there's areas of the blockchain and supply chain.
Okay, yep, okay. All right. All right, many of you 3, 4, good. All right, definitely 3. and 4 possibly. So you can see that every one of those areas, but I would also argue, and let's have a look. What does 3 say? Let's have a look. 3. So that list there, look at it. Advanced analytics, augmented reality, big data, cloud, digitization, Internet of Things, mobile application. Like these are all information technology affected, if not areas, but the technology by itself. For example, RFID, for example, cloud-based application. Some are very, very specific, like RFID, whereas cloud-based applications is very, very broad. And so I want you to start, I don't want you to just see this like, oh, this is just electronic blockchain. I want you to see this as thinking about, wow, you know, this is how the future of work is going to be affected. It's not just supply chain. And I think I would say slide number, 21 is good. I would say also slide number 20 and 17. So if you go to 17, there's 17, and these are all aspects of digitization, and that's really front and center. I would remember, I want to talk to you not just as global supply chain management students, but as students getting ready for you know, you're trying to figure out your future career, you either a career shift or a career progression that all of you are either focusing on. You're either going to shift your careers or you're going to try and progress with your careers. You need to know at least half of these things. All right, because any one industry is affected by any 2 or 3 of these things. Okay, so keep those in mind, especially do short courses, do the micro credentials, use Coursera, free online. Keep your knowledge up to date with these things. Remember in week 6, which of these did we cover in week 6 or week 7 of this unit in 17? Type it into the chat room now, please. Come on, quick. Remember the startups? What were those startups doing? This is interactive. Type it in. You're a bit slow tonight. What's going on? IoT. Well done, Kate. Very good. Kate, Emerald, good. IoT. Exactly. That we looked at IoT startups in week 6, I believe, and the hardware startups and the big challenges they had in actually managing their suppliers. Okay, so it is the Internet of Things was really, really big. There's a big thing we're going to look at tonight, and that is you'll see the role for that with respect to Bitcoin, and that is RFID. All right, and that's the second bottom one here. So it's very interesting that when they ask people, oh, what aspects of digitization do you believe can drive the most value? RFID is near the bottom. But one thing you're going to take away tonight is that RFID is an important technology when it comes to having smart contracts and blockchain for the physical flow of goods in the supply chain. But when they ask people, you know, what drives the most value, it's so funny. RFID is at the bottom, right? So I'm here not to read out the PowerPoint slides as they are. I just want to show you the funny things the contrasts that are really, really interesting. All right, number one, I can see you all have, that's just a starting point. Now, you know, here's our supply chain. And Andy McCowan talked about some of these problems last week. He gave actual examples. Can anyone tell me of an example that Andy gave last week that may be related to any of these 6 ideas? A free coffee, who can give the first example, please?
Redundancy and duplication of efforts.
Say that again, Audrey, explain.
I think he talked about too much documentation.
Right. And what example did he give though? It's one thing to say too much documentation, but what specific example did he give?
He said there were too many email chains.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was crazy, wasn't it? And what was the example about when they send the goods to the agent that receives the goods for the shipping, and or the person at the factory, the truck arrives at the factory. What was he saying there? Remember that example? What was the solution he was proposing? When the truck of goods arrived at the factory, with raw materials coming into the factory, what were the big questions on the mind? If you're the security guard at that gate and you have to make decisions about whether the trucks comes in or not, what were those big questions he was talking about?
Is it the validations of the information?
Yeah, and they were talking about like the log chain, and one of their solutions was that, if we can have an app where there's only 3 buttons and you can scan the details of the truck's documentation, then it can immediately verify everything that's needed to allow the truck to come into the factory. All right. So he was talking about these examples. All right. All right. So keep that in mind. I don't want you to remember the PowerPoint slide you got here. I want you to remember those examples that Andy talked about, because that's what you won't forget. You'll forget this list here, but if you remember those examples, how vivid they were, then that's the best way to learn something, to learn about the problems of something. All right. And I can read out, oh, you got to remember 6 things here and then memorize that, but it has no meaning at all if you don't know the examples that Andy talked about last week. All right, let's keep moving here. I want to remember it's early night tonight. Right. So let's go to our next big question for you. Bill of lading. Thank you, Xinyao. Thank you. All right. Our next question is, let's go to slide 9. But before, in the process of going to 9, we're going past blockchain versus a database. Okay, number 2. Yes. All right. What is the difference between a blockchain and a database? Write it in the chat room now, please. What is the biggest difference? If someone asks you, oh, what's the difference between blockchain and a database? What's the biggest difference? What's one thing that comes to mind? Amrul, you said decentralized. You could say blockchain can be decentralized, right? Blockchain can be centralized too. Am I right? See, Kate, you said centralized versus decentralized, right? So, Amrul, what do you mean by one is decentralized, one is centralized? What do you mean by that, Amrul?
I mean, I took it from the definition, but decentralized as in it's not like one organization looking over everything and like setting all the regulations in a way.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. When you say decentralized or centralized, and remember, you can read the PowerPoint slide and memorize that if you want to, but I want you to just think a little bit more about this. And this is what we're about tonight. When we say decentralized, centralized or centralized of what? Okay. And so you may think, all right, decentralized or centralized of the data entry, for example. All right. So with the database, in some ways, you try and keep it controlled or you keep the data entry controlled by the administrator, whereas a blockchain enables you to decentralize the data entry. But of course, blockchain can still be centralized and controlled by administrator too. Just because it's blockchain doesn't mean it has to be, it's not controlled by an administrator, all right? Because then there's other reasons to have a blockchain, not just on the control of data entry, okay? It could be in terms of the integrity, the fact that even the administrator still controls it, but the administrator cannot change it after the information has been put in. But with a database, the administrator can go and change it afterwards. You see what I mean? All right, so just when you get into doing these comparisons, you always got to think about, okay, it's not just a black or white, you know, blockchain's black and the database is white, all right? It really depends on what purpose you are talking about. Okay, this is great. I love this participation that we're going on here. Let's go to the next one. Next big question. And I can see all of you are putting stuff in. Esther, Nadia, transparency. Michelle, transparency. Excellent, Adrian. I'm just wondering if database. All right, good. All right, so let's go to the next one. And this is what I want, what the PowerPoint slides are really covering. There are 3 different parts. And once you've gotten over, you know, the deadlines of your assessment and all that, go back and have a look at my 3 videos that I posted in the Google Hangout. It's in Moodle. It's in my YouTube. That is, I made 3 videos on blockchain. A, the building blocks. What is blockchain? What does it mean? Things like that. And then B, the supply chain benefits associated with blockchain. That's in a separate video. And C, some case study examples. So A goes for about 17 minutes, B 18 minutes, C goes for 9 minutes. So you got a total of 45 minutes. All right. So, oh, excuse me, apologies for that. Here's a big thing that you will not see in a fintech course or a cryptocurrency course or a blockchain supply chain course. And there's one of these things that's missing from a lot of the teachings on the blockchain. So all of you, which one of these is missing? Like I've done the Princeton course on cryptography. You know, I've done the Hong Kong New course on fintech. I actually designed and teach the fintech for the undergraduates at Monash. And I've also studied consensus mechanisms and oracles. Which one of these is missing from a lot of discussion when we talk about the blockchain? A, B, or C? In the chat room, please. And if you don't know, you have a 33% chance. All right. Okay, some JC, what do you think? This is better than Squid Game. I'm giving you a 33% chance to get it right here. All right. So many of you said C. So let's, Nadia, why did you say C? Nadia, hello. We got to move fast here. Someone said, Maria, you said B. Why did you say B?
So I was guessing for this. I don't know.
Well, it was a good guess. Do you think? Now, why do you think it's a good guess?
I'm not even sure what oracles are, to be honest.
Okay, that's good. Now I've got you thinking. Oliver, you said B, you're hedging.
Yeah.
Well, speak up,
I want
please.
more chance. So
Speak up or you go to the end of the line.
okay. So with relation to what Andy said, there's a missing of integration between all these steps. An Oracle or a node in that sense that can communicate with all the steps throughout the supply chain, maybe a security guard or a master issuing a bill of lading. That's what you often miss.
You're very good. That's close to correct. Oracles are the things that collect information in the world. Okay, so your Oracle, Skylar, is not that character in the matrix. Okay, all right. The know-all, right? In some ways, in the physical world, it is a know-all because it's collecting information. When a truck goes from A to B, the Oracle tells the system the truck has gone from A to B. Maybe your Google Maps that's tracking your car fleet of cars, and you've got the all these tracking apps now on trucks and cars and everything. That's what we call an Oracle. Right? So the Oracle is collecting. Oracle is something that collects the data. Cryptography is the stuff that secures the data. And consensus mechanisms, what do they do? If one collects the data, one secures the data, what does the other do? Audrey says govern. Very close. It's kind of, yeah, it's kind of like govern. I like that, Audrey. That's a good word. That is good. It governs. It's authorized the data type. Audrey, I like your word there, govern. That's excellent. All right. So basically, there's about 5 or 6 slides that comes after this A, B, and C that says what we just talked about. So it's amazing. All of you know a lot about blockchain already. Like, this is the cryptography part. And in 30 seconds, can someone tell me the difference between the SHA-256, the block, and the blockchain? Anyone? All right. The SHA-256, that is basically the cryptography algorithm, right? It's the hash algorithm that's used, right? And so you can think about 256 characters in length, and each of those characters is hexadecimal, which means 0 to 9 plus A, B, C, D, E, F, right? Plus 6, right? So then you've got 16 different characters, numeric, alphanumeric characters for each of those 256. So you can see, wow, that's a huge number. Right? Okay, so that's the algorithm. Then you got the block. What does the block do? Kate, you're right, stores data. But your answer, Kate, your answer, I know, is correct for the previous question, is incorrect for the previous question, but it's correct for this question. That is, the block is what stores the data. All right. The block is what stores the data. So what's the difference between the block and the blockchain?
Isn't that the calculation that miners make? It's what do you call it? If you make, let's say, if you make an exchange, this is a part of a block on the blockchain. It's been mined, so there's a calculation being done by those miners to verify between all the accounts. Is that how it works?
Well, basically, the blockchain is the series of blocks that are linked by the cryptography, the SHA-256. Basically, they refer to the SHA-256 as the hash. All right. So, and that's how the blocks of data are linked together with the cryptography. All right. If you're really interested in cryptography, I recommend that Princeton course is amazing. I enrolled in this course at Princeton University on cryptography, and there was, I think there was 8 modules you had to do. At the end of the first module, which has about 2.5 hours of lectures and lots of multiple choice, then they say, oh, now you have to submit a project. And they're expecting you at the end of the first module out of an 8-module online course to actually do all the programming for a Dogecoin, for a cryptocurrency. That was their assessment for the first module. And anyway, like, I didn't pay, I'm sort of auditing it, and I sort of skipped over it, but I thought, oh, I wonder how many people did what I did. So I went into the chat room and everyone's throwing their arms up saying, oh, this is crazy. How can they ask us to do this at the end of the first module? Like, I've already studied computer science and cryptography. This is crazy, asking us to create a cryptocurrency at the end of the first module. So it's so funny. All right. Yeah, Oliver, exactly. All right. So that's all we need to know. But why do you need to know the basics here? Because I want you to be smart. I want you to be smart, because what was the very first question I asked you tonight, Esther?
Oh, sorry.
Tell me
First question.
Tell me which slide represent what? What was that question?
Blockchain in. Sorry, I didn't remember.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What's Maria? What was the very first question tonight? I challenged you all with.
What is the most, how would blockchain help us for work in the future?
Well, I didn't say blockchain directly, but I said which slide represents, right, characteristics of your future work environment, right? And so you went and pulled out slide number 3, slide number 4, slide 20 or 21 or 17, right? Because they all had lists of things, right? And on that list, there was RFID, there was augmented reality, there was cloud, there was all these things, right? So I want you need to be comfortable with understanding the second level of what these things are. If you can understand the second level, like I'm showing you the second level of what a blockchain is, right? You go to the third level, that's where you start figuring it out yourself, and actually creating your own blockchain. But at this level here, you need to understand that the block collects the data. So in other words, a series of blocks is just like a database. So the difference with a blockchain is that you are linking all these blocks with a cryptographic algorithm. So therefore, when the data goes into those blocks, they cannot be changed. Okay. So in other words, that's how a blockchain starts to become different from a database, because of the cryptographic SHA-256 hash algorithm that's linking all these groups of data together. Okay. And all those groups of data together, there's nothing special about that, Michelle. All those groups of data could be all the different spreadsheet files that you have in your computer, right? And each spreadsheet file's got data in it, right? And then you create a hash algorithm based on all that data, and then you link that to the next spreadsheet, and it stops you from changing the data in that spreadsheet. You link to the next spreadsheet. That's all. All right. And then suddenly you've created your own blockchain. All right. So I don't want you don't have to overthink this. All right. The whole idea of cryptography is to create immutability, that is the non-changeability of a block in the past. Okay, enough. All right, this is not a computer science course tonight, but I want you to be comfortable. Go away. You go into a job interview, you need to be able to say that, oh, I've heard about it. I know some uses of it. More than, please don't say Bitcoin. All right. That's all I know. All right. That's in terms of blockchain. You know more than that. All right. Even before you join my course. All right. And like, this is more detail here. You can go into that, and there's links. You can go to the blockchain supply chain demo and actually look at how it works. So what you've got here is just like a spreadsheet 1, spreadsheet 2, and basically one is linked to the other by the hash. Okay. And notice on the one on the left-hand side, the hash is at the bottom 00000C5. And notice then we go to the next block at the bottom, it says previous is 0000C5, and that becomes the chain between the blocks. That's it. Okay, there's your blockchain. Right. So you're probably asking me, well, how did that hash come about? Let me ask you this, Yinghui, or JC, or Darren, or Adrian. You can save them, or Nadia, or Lisa, or Ginny, or Maria. Right? How did that 0000C5 come about in the in the left-hand side? Let's call it a spreadsheet. How did it come about? Once you know how it comes about, then that's all you need to know about blockchain. You'll know everything you need to know. Emerald, how does it come about? Oh,
Is it from decimal numbers?
Well, you get SHA-256, but no, not the cryptography side, but how does, what if I were to change, see, we moved $25 from Darcy to Bingley, right? You see that? Like, that could be a transaction where you, Oliver, I transfer 1 Bitcoin to Oliver, right? No, I wouldn't do that, but maybe 0.000001. All right. Okay. So that's what that's representing, right? That's just like a transaction, and each blockchain in Bitcoin has a group of these transactions, like it's an ongoing ledger that's connected, right? So if I change that 25 from Darcy to Bingley, what if I say, oh, I change it? What if I change that to $50 from Darcy to Bingley? What will change on that spreadsheet on the left-hand side? Let's call it spreadsheets. Let's relax what we're talking about here, because all they are spreadsheets. They're holding data. That's all they're doing. What would change if I change that from 25 to 50? Skylar, Nusrat, Lisa, Nadia, what would change on that page? Will the block change? Will the nonce change? The previous change, or the hash change? There's 4 things. I'll give you, let's play Squid Game rules here. I'll give you a 25% chance of getting it right. In the chat room, A is block, B, the nonce, C, previous, PREV, D, the hash. Let's go. Everyone, please. 25% chance here. And we'll go fast here, otherwise we're going to be here to midnight. All right, so I've just given you 4 options. Number 1, the block number won't change. Okay, the nonce will not change. The previous will not change because there's no previous, but the hash will change. Basically, the hash is the outcome of all that data that is in that block goes into the cryptography algorithm, and out of that comes this hash. That hash is basically a summary of all the data. And you can just change $25 to 2501, and all of those characters in the hash will change. And because that hash, let's go to the right-hand side, it becomes the previous. Once that gets linked to the most current spreadsheet that you're putting data in, then it's impossible for you to go back and change that $25 to $50, because it will change the hash, and then suddenly the link with that chain will be broken. That's it. That's it. All right. Okay. So that's how the blockchain works. That's all you need to know. Okay. But it's really, really good that you have a little bit of understanding like that. I think it's really helpful for you. So now let's talk about that was the cryptography. Now we're talking about oracles. This, and as you agreed in the Amaral said, I'm scared now. Sounds like data class. Thank you, Oliver. All right. That's all right. Oracle is basically the thing that's missing from a lot of blockchain classes, a lot of cryptography classes, and a lot of fintech classes, or even classes on Bitcoin. In some ways, the oracles in Bitcoin are kind of like the data miners. All right. Okay. But in the supply chain, the oracles become RFID, barcode scanner, software, okay, market data, data triggers, anything online that's updated and you're linking to that like an IoT device, then you can suddenly, that can become an oracle. All right. And human, where you've got actual people pulling a switch when something happens that you cannot mechanize the occurrence of a particular event. Okay, so that's what we mean by oracle. It's about digitalizing things that happen in the real world. And you think around the world, the big thing I think the big thing you want to think about is an oracle was like a sensor. So the sensor can be robotic, like RFID barcode, it's kind of robotic, right? Okay. Software is kind of robotic too, because it's programmed, but human, then you got human sensors. Okay. Facial recognition, that's an oracle. All right. It's a facial recognition sensing technology there. Oh, Neil's in the room. He shouldn't be in the room. And so then the alarm goes off, right? That's what we mean by an oracle, but you're using hardware and software to actually trigger that event. So let's go back just, all right. So cryptography, right? So I've showed you how you connect two spreadsheets and make sure that the original one becomes immutable because you use the cryptography hash algorithm that is generated because of the data that's contained inside. If you change that data, it changes the hash algorithm, then you break the link with the next spreadsheet. That's A. Let's go to B, oracles. Oracles is either hardware, software, or human, but we're just talking about sensors in the world that pick up events, that pick up physical movement, that pick up differences. Okay. All right. Changes in temperature, sensors. We are surrounded by sensors everywhere these days. Now, the final thing I just want to talk about is consensus mechanisms. And that's probably what many of you are familiar with. And Andy mentioned that last week. Really? All right. Let's just a reminder again, yell it out. Which of these is if we're going to introduce blockchain in the supply chain, which of these do you think is the hardest to introduce? A, B, or C? In chat room, please. Emerald, B, Xixin, B, exactly. Well done. Very quick tonight. Love that. All right. The oracles is the hardest part to implement. Cryptography, that's easy. Just get a computer science person and do some programming on a computer. That's easy. Well, you still got to pay them the time, right? Just go, all right. Consensus mechanisms, as you'll find out, well, that's just a matter of, you know, deciding how you organize something, and you can outsource that. Like Andy McEwen last week for their log chain, they basically outsourced their consensus mechanism. All right. They're programmed in, and with the consensus mechanism, you know, there's cryptography built into that, right? Their hardest part is with the oracles. Their hardest part is with the B. Ah, wow. All right. So what do we mean by consensus mechanism? Here we go. Here's the 1, 2, and 3. And that is, we all know Bitcoin, fine. But here's a question for everyone. All right. Next question is, have a look. And, just a minute. I've got you here. Okay. Are you ready, ski daddies? On the chat room, a cyber coffee, who can get this one right? I don't know what it tastes like, but I've got to try and reward you. All right. Which one of these consensus protocols is used by logchain? A for Bitcoin, B for Ethereum. Well, yeah. C for the enterprise blockchain like Ripple. D for a consortium blockchain. Used by logchain. Which one does logchain use? Everyone's saying B. Everyone's saying Ethereum. D. Yinghui, what does D question mark mean?
Because I watched your video and you say that the consortium one is used by the logistic.
But why do you put a question mark next to it?
Yeah, because I'm not sure.
But you're right. You're right. It's actually Hyperledger. All right. They're using the Hyperledger platform for logchains using Hyperledger. Like logchain is a software as a service. The biggest challenge, if you listen to Andy talk about last week, was getting clients to embrace the efficiencies that they can bring in and getting the clients to move away from their legacy systems of SAP and their ERP systems, right? And all that documentation that goes with all these different silos that they have. But they're using Hyperledger, all right? So it's logchain's product is not, it's not a decentralized token like Ethereum or Bitcoin. Ripple is really associated with working with banks. Ethereum is a public blockchain and so is Bitcoin, but they're working with Hyperledger, private blockchain. And you'll find that in the future, the growth of blockchain is really in the private area, not necessarily in the public area. In fact, the mining and the carbon footprint of Bitcoin in terms of energy used in the mining is larger than Switzerland. It's just crazily high. People don't fully understand totally because no one sees the mining. All right. They just see the price of Bitcoin. So it's, that's something that they'll have to reckon with in the future as people become much more socially conscious and see the more transparency of, you know, the energy that's taken up by the mining for Bitcoin. All right. But the consortium blockchain doesn't need all of this decentralized mining for the agreement of this hash algorithm to join all these data blocks together. Okay. All right. So the governance is it's private. All right. Great. So we're doing well here tonight. Remember, we're trying to do this through a Q&A rather than me just telling you and getting you to remember. I want you to think. All right. Just to remind you again, we can go, which one of these is important for your job in the future, do you think? All right, remember, this is 17. It is important for your job. Some of these items, obviously, I would expect advanced analytics is going to be big. If you want to study more, study analytics, understand data, understand pivot tables in Excel, understand how to move data, how to present data. Okay, supply chain systems, integration with trading partners. This is kind of what LogChain is trying to do, right? Supply chain systems integration internally. Okay, LogChain is much more between, but of course they're trying to get it integrated as well. Okay, Internet of Things on their own at the moment, mobile applications, or just about anything like LogChain, they want to have a mobile application because they want to be able to have anyone in the field to be able to be an oracle for collecting information about the physical movement of goods wherever a company's employees are. So just try and relate these to things that are going to impact your future work, because every organization around the world, including Monash University, are going through processes of digitalization, not just supply chains. All right, let's keep moving. Now, that was what is blockchain? All right, so all of you worried a bit, scared off about the computer science and all that, you can relax now. Now let's have a look at the benefits of the blockchain. And very quickly, it's coming up on the hour and then we'll have a break for about 5 minutes. What is the let's go to the benefits. Here we go. All right. So there's all these benefits here and great. Have a look at that. Great. But here are the pain points. Here's the question for you. All right, these are pain points. Traceability. Andrew talked about these last week. Traceability, dispute resolution, cargo integrity and security, digitization, compliance, trust, stakeholder management. You can see that these are all pain points. So what's the difference between pain points and these benefits? That's the question. There's your pain points, DAATT, all right? There's the pain point. These are the benefits you get from using blockchain in the supply chain: audit trail, accessible, trust, transparency, documentation. Here are the pain points. You can see, number 6, trust, identical, right? What about traceability? That's a pain point. Traceability, is that mentioned here? Possibly. Transparency across the supply chain. Okay. Immutable system of proof under documentation. Dispute resolution. In order to resolve disputes, you need to have some system of proof you may need to have some transparency, some visibility on the process. I want you to think about these rather than just remember the lists. All right. So other pain points. All right. So having said that, in some ways, the benefits and pain points, they're two different ways of looking at something. All right. So if I go to a customer and I'm trying to sell blockchain to the customer, I might say, oh, here's all the benefits of the blockchain. All right. Or I might change my sales strategy and says, oh, do you have challenges in any of these areas? Like, are any of these your pain points? All right. And, oh yeah, especially number 2 and number 3 and, oh, number 5. Oh, the regulators are getting crazy these days. Oh, I'm glad you said that. Well, my solution can help you because each of these benefits can help address number 2, 3, and 5 in different ways. So, you know, they sort of talk about the same thing, but they're kind of coming into the same thing by different angles. Okay. So this is a way of selling a service of what blockchain can do for the supply chain. Having said that, so let's map it up, shall we? All right. So let's go to I'll get ready for your next big question in the chat room. All right. So we could map up the uses of blockchain in the supply chain, that is low to high complexity or low adoption to high adoption. So I want you to have a look. What do you think is the area that would give companies the biggest bang for the buck? Have a look at, if we were to, which quadrant should we be focusing on if we were starting out and putting blockchain into the supply chain? Should we start at the bottom left-hand side? Should we start at the top right-hand side? Emerald, top right. Suresh, top right. Gabriella, low. So Emerald, why do you say this is good? Some more, I want your participation here. I want you to think. I want you to think practically, because you might be in a job interview and they might say, oh, you learned all this in MIB and O'Connor taught you this and you did computer science. And, you know, we really need you to have some input on our digitization team. And have you got any ideas where we should start? Well, what are you going to say? All right. All right. So I want you to practically, when you are consulting or when you are talking to companies, if you're trying to provide a solution, sometimes companies are better. They can embrace change if you say, oh, let's do a pilot study. You with me here? So then the question is, well, where do you do the pilot study? It's the same idea. And so would you do a pilot study in quadrant top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right? Where would you do your pilot study? It's another way of thinking about it. Okay. Anyone else? This is real stuff here. Nadia. Is there any name that I haven't read out tonight? I just want to make sure that I'm giving everyone equal attention and treatment, you know. All right. Some of you put top right. Anyone else? Yeah, top right. Okay. Why would you want to start in the top right? Anyone? please. I've asked a question that
maybe like low complexity is it's just easier to understand by everyone, and then if it's high adoption, then it's just easier to apply, which is
absolutely exactly right. And this is where, so this is how I want you to see this. So when, you know, I'm showing you lots of slides, and it's not about memorizing the slide, it's about getting you to think strategically like a consultant. Okay. All right. So no successful consultant goes in and changes everything. Okay. And so you've got to know where to start. So this slide is a very nice way of thinking about, well, maybe we should be focusing on tracking asset maintenance rather than thinking about, you know, digital thread or inventory and pilferage tracking. Why? Because it's a little bit more complex. Maybe for inventory and pilferage tracking, you need more oracles, and that's why it's more complex. You with me? Whereas tracking asset maintenance, the simplification of oracles to get that information may be easier, and that's why less complexity. Remember the oracle, remember the A, B, and C, you know, the cryptography, the oracle, what was the third one? Hello? Cryptography, oracle, and
Consensus mechanism.
Consensus mechanism.
what? Consensus mechanism. Which is the hardest part? It's the oracle.
Oracle.
It's the oracle. It's always the hardest part, because that's, you've got to be able to trust the oracle. All right, because garbage in, garbage out, right? You with me? So that's why if you can start off, you know, let's just work on the areas where we can simplify the secure data collection, which is on your right-hand side. And then once we get comfortable with that, then we can move across to the left-hand side. That's what I want you to say. That's what I want you to think about. I think that's what makes this diagram special. Okay, so it's a really nice way of thinking about where do you begin, where do you start. Okay, let's keep moving. All right, so now, all right, so now let's overlay at the top the pain points with some of the parts of the supply chain. That is, it's product flow, process flow, information, cash flow. The bottom two rows are basically what can be digitalized. The top rows, that's the physical world. In order to work with the top two rows, you need oracles. You're with me here? Of course, you have oracles. You need oracles everywhere, but you need more. There's more complexity in the oracles you need for the top two rows than you need for the bottom two rows. Ah, wow. Okay, and so this is one way of thinking about, okay, if we want to solve the compliance pain point, then the big thing about the supply chain is the physical flow of goods, not the information flow, not the money flow. Okay, it's the process flow. We need to know for particular compliance procedures, maybe lab testing, QC audit testing. You know, these are all process flows that we have oracles to collect that information to make sure, yes, we have done this. Yes, we have passed. All right, that's the compliance. You see that? So that's one way of making this a little bit more specific depending on what pain point that a company may have. And then if you want to go more detail, then we can break out those pain points into a little, you know, more. So compliance goes into transparency and auditing, preventing compliance violations. All right, that's what you want to do, right? You just got to minimize, you know, compliance is all about risk management. So this is how we're trying to map solving various pain points with aspects in the supply chain, and what the big difference between the supply chain and Bitcoin is there's a digital flow of information, but also there's the physical flow. There's the real world flow. All right. So in Bitcoin, it's basically all the digital flow. There's, so to speak, there's no real world flow of things that you have to capture. Okay. All right. So finally, and actually we're near the end, because what I did promise you, let's have a break for 5 minutes and we'll come back and we'll look at examples, because I told you tonight we're going to look at how blockchain works, the benefits of the blockchain. We just talked about the benefits. All right. And then finally, some examples, and that's it. Okay. But in that process, and you're doing some interactions here, showing you how important it is that to be more aware of these things, especially for your future line of work, whether in supply chain or not in the supply chain. I'll see you in 5 minutes. Okay. Take my blue glasses off.